Thank you for staying with us. Now, let's turn our attention to the power sector here in Nigeria. Nigerians were on Wednesday plunged into darkness following another collapse of the national power grid. From January 2024 till November, the grid has collapsed 11 times. Within 1 week in October, the grid collapsed 3 times with its attendant blackouts, sparking reactions from Nigerians. A tweet via the official handle of Nigeria's national grid confirmed that the grid collapsed at about 2:09 p.m. on Wednesday. This collapse makes it a historic 12 times in a year that the grid has collapsed. And so to discuss this, we are joined by a former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission and director of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts, Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Sam Amadi, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Amadi, what are the underlying causes of the frequent power grid collapse in Nigeria? I know you've been asked this question many times. You perhaps have answered it here on this platform. But are there specific issues related to infrastructure or maintenance or operational practices that need to be addressed?
All the above, all the above. By the way, this is a question ad infinitum ad museum, all the time people ask it and you feel bad about it, but what can we do? First is grid collapse. The grid collapses because the grids are frail. Nigerian grid is very frail, meaning you need to revamp them. Some of those lines ought to be, bad, dilapidated. And so the lack of investment in upgrade, in revampment, it means that the grid is frail. Secondly, we have very low insufficient generation. So oftentimes there's no spirit reserves. There are no redundancies to cope with maybe some of the frequency problems. Again, distribution and transmission don't kind of have a good handshake. So sometimes loads are available, transmission network delivers, but the network cannot pick the load. Sometimes a disturbance from the distribution side that affected. And then, of course, now we talk about vandalism. Maybe once there was a fire outbreak along Abuja, Chiroro, that caused a serious grid collapse. So all this goes back to the same thing, which is that our grid is weak. The managerial capability, change management strategies are still poor. Leadership in terms of efficiency, because some of these collapses are also functions, not just of very structural defects in terms of frailty of the grid, but also change management failures, lack of diligence, weak maintenance turnaround time, weak supervision and reviews, and things like that. So if we excuse that we need to make some serious investment and expansion of grid and maintenance, development of grid, but how about some of the failures arising from lack of diligence and weak grid management for the part of TCN and the DISCO? So that's a problem. It tells us where we are. Where we are is that we are in a weak situation, made worse over the years. In 2016, 15, 16, 2-3 years after the privatization, we had fewer grid collapses up until 2018-19.
Dr. Amadi.
More frequent. Since last year, it was the worst.
Okay. Now, if that response had come from anybody else, I would have taken it lightly. But for it to come from you, I'm very, very worried. But noting all these factors that are plaguing the grid system or our infrastructure, do you know how this affects Nigerian businesses, the economy generally, small businesses that rely very heavily on electricity, for instance, and also the manufacturing industry?
Well, the point is that this is not just theory. I mean, we can rehearse all the problem, but the key point is that it has tangible and calculable losses that businesses, homes suffer. Look, it might look, we don't want to be theatrical, but there could be people who are on life support, who are on very serious surgical treatments, and a few cases reported of fatalities arising from the light going out and maybe no backup system. You can imagine if you do some research and look at the extent of welfare loss that Nigerians suffer, either because They don't have enough power to do the basic things, healthcare, education, food preservation. Now look at the agro sector, the whole value chain from agriculture to storage to from the farm to storage to transport. They rely a lot on electricity. So the failure has impact on yield and on agro business, small and medium enterprises. The cost of self-provisioning. So if the grid collapses more frequently, it means that businesses are going to rely on self-provision for electricity, self-generation, whether small businesses with their small diesel and fuel and PMS-powered generators. The cost per unit of power they're going to assess. For example, this morning, those small business enterprises rely on power, the barbers, the iron workers, and so on and so forth, would be running on generator, and that increases cost of doing business, diminishes profit margin, and often takes them out of business. So the real economic cost of this is huge, and some calculations say maybe if we had a more stable power, we could have up to 5% additional contribution to GDP. But at the household level, the loss of income, the loss of welfare, the crime and criminality, because most of our cities are lost in darkness, that contributes a lot to insecurity and to crime rate. So if we get the country, the grid working and people have enough light, maybe you'll see some significant drop in some of this low-level criminality, mobbing of people, sexual harassment, rape, and some of the soft attacks that people experience because they are living in cities that there are no lights in the streets. So the cost is huge and very depressing that we have to be talking about this at this age.
Depressing indeed, and what a critical way to look at it from a very wide perspective. Thank you very much, Dr. Amadi. But I still got one question for you regarding the steps that should be taken by the Nigerian government. What steps could they take to address the issues of frequent power grid? Many will say a complete overhaul of the entire infrastructure, but can we afford that?
I think there should be three steps, really, three kinds of steps. One is we have to keep on investing in increasing the reliability of the grid. Now, we can also regionalize. The New Electricity Act has created impetus for decentralization. So the transmission network perhaps ought to be regionalized at this point. That may give us some efficiency. Again, you can't but deal with leadership failure. The management of the network needs to improve, and that requires high caliber management. And of course, we need to make the investment environment profitable for private investors and more financing of the grid. I mean, you have to declare that the government alone may not be able to make all investments, but the government has to create an environment, and the government has to lead in structuring the network in a way that makes investment more profitable and operations more efficient. So we have a couple of steps we can take to mitigate these failures and improve the grid performance.
Dr. Amadi, I want to say thank you very much for joining us this evening to give your expert opinion on the issue. Thank you indeed, sir.
Thank you.